Okay, I think we can get started. And as you can see, we are doing like a radio show here with Joao. This is Andres Bonet speaking, and we have here with us Karen. Karen, hi.
Good morning. Welcome from Washington.
Yes, very good, very good. So truly transatlantic membership orientation. We have a small group, but excellent to have a great interactive discussion. And whatever question you may have, just fire away, put it into the chat box, or if something comes to mind after the session, just send us an email. We'll be happy to follow up, whether it concerns European membership or membership as such. Karen or ourselves will be happy to address it. So today we'll cover all the points of Public Affairs Council membership, what we offer, the kind of benefits you can have access to. And most of you are already members, but we know some are considering membership or have interest in the work that we do. So we will cover all these points. Here's a little rundown of our positions and names. But the brief agenda that we're going to cover is what you see on the screen. So there's a short introduction about who we are and the history of the Public Affairs Council, which is not going to turn into a history lesson, but to show you the path we've taken over the many decades that the Council is in existence. And then show you the various resources and services we have available to members, and then how you can get involved if you'd like to be more engaged with the various services that we offer. So with that, perhaps over to Karen to say a few words about the Council.
Great, thank you. And by way of introductions, my name is Karen Seligman. I'm the Senior Director at the Council. I work in our Washington, D.C. office normally, although I'm here today in my home in Bethesda, Maryland. My role at the Council is to oversee membership. And so that has two main components. The first, and perhaps the most important, is to make sure that all of our current members are aware of and taking advantage of all the resources and services that are included with your membership in the Public Affairs Council. And secondly, we try to bring new organizations into the fold to help expand the presence of the Public Affairs Council, both in the US, Europe, and the rest of the world. So as Andres mentioned, our organization was founded back in the 1950s, actually at the urging of President Eisenhower, who felt that the business community really needed to be engaged in a more thoughtful and a strategic conversation with government agencies and community entities. And so over the years, our organization has morphed from a very small group of large corporations to a global organization that has more than 700 organizations that are members. And because the organization holds the membership and all of their employees are entitled to access the resources and services, that means more than 10,000 public affairs practitioners throughout the world are part of the Public Affairs Council family. As you figured out by now, we have offices both in Washington and in Brussels. There are about 24 of us who normally sit in Washington. In addition, Joao and Andres are in our Brussels office. For those of you who do have the opportunity to come visit us in Washington, our office is on the very famous K Street in Washington, D.C., which is best known for being a place where a lot of lobbyists' offices are and a lot of business of Washington gets done. And while that's true, it's unusual that the council's office does sit on K Street, because while we talk about best practices in advocacy, we do not lobby as an organization. We are here to essentially be an advocate for the advocates. So we are both nonpartisan, non-political, and nonprofit. And so though we are a small group of staff, we are a mighty group. We produce more than 150 events throughout the course of the year, usually a combination of in-person and virtual, but in these times we have moved everything virtual. On this slide, you're going to get just a small sampling of who those 700 member organizations are. You'll see that they span large corporations and mid-sized corporations, ones that are based in the US, ones that are based in various capitals throughout the world. There are also associations and advocacy groups. And we really feel that this is one of the tremendous strengths of the council, because while you often probably spend time with other organizations in your particular industry sector, what you're going to find as you get more engaged with the council is that you're going to have some terrific exposure to new ideas from people from other sectors. So for example, if you are in the pharmaceutical sector, you're going to find that other areas, for example, if you're sitting next to someone from a telecommunications company or someone from an advocacy group, though their mission and their structure and even their budget may be vastly different from what yours is, we find that good ideas come from everywhere. And so we try to bring together a very diverse group of organizations so that you get exposed to the cutting edge best practices in the field. Team Europe, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, and I think this diversity that you're talking about, Karen, it also applies here in Europe. So out of these 700 plus organizations that are members of the Public Affairs Council, I believe some 200 are European companies and organizations or with offices in Europe. So that's a fairly large amount of organizations represented. And they also come from across sectors and across industries and across organizational profiles. As you mentioned, there is a lot of diversity there and a lot of possibilities, and we'll talk about this later on, for professionals and teams working in specific sectors to learn from teams working in a very different field. So I think that's quite interesting. This is a little bit a graph that shows how the different organizations, member organizations of the council are represented. So we have roughly 48% of our members are corporations, 29% associations, trade associations, consultancies represent about 20%, and others such as NGOs, for instance, or other similar initiatives or government institutions represent some 33% of our membership. And well, our mission, as I think has become apparent from what we have been saying so far, but in a nutshell, our mission is really to advance the field of public affairs and provide the tools and resources that enable executives and managers to achieve their business and professional goals. So basically, we are here to provide executive education opportunities and networking opportunities that enable organizations and public affairs professionals to do their job better and learn from each other. Really, this notion of, I think, peer-to-peer learning is a very important concept for us, because it allows our members to learn from one another and learn what we can really call best practices about how to achieve their goals better and be better at what they do.
Yeah, just to reinforce that point, it's really, as we as an organization try to organize as many events as we can around these topics, which are horizontal in nature, which are not industry specific. So you may be in the energy sector or environment, or dealing with sustainability issues, or perhaps dealing with chemicals, any sector or industry, but we're looking at the horizontal questions of the trade. And we'll present to you the main pillars of activities that we offer, so you have a better idea of what kind of questions we can help you with. The second point is that we as an organization try to sit in the middle of this web, as the spiders in the middle of the web, trying to distill those best practices and then share it back with the community. So we also learn a lot from our members, and then we try to share it back with the community. So it's not only connecting them with each other, but we also try to be a resource and a hub of that sort of information. And then perhaps just one word on the terminology. Internally, we refer to ourselves as the council, But being based in Brussels, all of you would know that there are many councils in this town. So simply the council should not be misleading, and sometimes we are just PAC. But when we say council, it's not the Council of the EU. This is the Public Affairs Council as us. With that, maybe we can go to the next slide to say a few words about the three main benefits of membership, which is expertise. We call it executive education, which certainly is not limited to the seniority at which you may be in the company. So you don't need to be an executive to take advantage of the executive education, but the very practical, tangible workshops and roundtables and other formats we offer. And then there is a community, which is not only networking, but goes beyond that of connecting you with your peers. So maybe João, or maybe I'll present this and then over to you. So pretty much the 5 pillars we like to structure our programs around will be on the screen in a moment. So you see here, the first one is really the European Union. Anything that's related to the workings of the EU is something we'd look at. So I regularly organize workshops, seminars on EU decision-making in the context of advocacy and lobbying. We follow pretty closely what's happening on an institutional procedural level when it comes to trialogues or comitology. That's for EU experts, of how regulatory procedures are taken or happen. Anything that's the workings and the engagement with European Union institutions, including members of parliament and lobbying best practices with EU officials. And then the second one would be political developments and trends. So we did quite a few events around Brexit, and obviously it's still high on the agenda, though pretty much everybody's getting a little tired of that, including those involved in the Brexit negotiations. But still, from an advocacy lobbying perspective, obviously it's a very important topic. We look at things such as the upcoming German presidency, how to engage with the officials involved and the diplomats of the German presidency. So anything that's a political development, transatlantic public affairs features high, and obviously this is election year in the US with major implications on global politics. It's something we look at. And now very topical is the COVID-19 and public affairs management in practice is another major topic for this year, certainly. And then the third one is public affairs management. This is a topic that is often overlooked or not discussed enough, and we are really at the forefront of finding the good ideas, the best practices there. So public affairs strategy, management, what are the rules around legal and ethics compliance, transparency, and then certainly on issues and stakeholder management or strategic public affairs, KPIs, measurement. These are topics we regularly discuss at our events. Number 4 is strategic and digital. So looking at social media and advocacy, what to do with online engagement, what sort of trends are out there, what strategic communications best practices can we offer to the members. And I regularly run workshops on that topic. And sort of my personal pet peeve is the communicating science, which is an increasingly difficult area. And then last but not least, perhaps, is basically everything else. That's stakeholders, NGOs, emerging topics, looking at social trends. We are considering setting up a club or some structured way for women in public affairs. And then there are many other trendy and interesting topics from AI and blockchain and sustainability. It's something we keep an eye on, and if we spot a need or an interest from our members, then we try to organize an event on that particular topic.
Yeah, and maybe I would say, and perhaps also Karen has something to add about this, is that these are knowledge areas that we here in the European office possess, but also are very fortunate to count on the expertise of our colleagues in the United States that have a lot of expertise and experience in these areas. Digital and social media advocacy, public affairs strategy and public affairs management, issues management are some of the immediate topics that come to mind. And then obviously one one area in which we offer also quite a unique, I believe, expertise is in transatlantic public affairs, because this is really at the core of what we are now as an organization, and being fortunate to have teams on both sides of the Atlantic. It's something that we are very much tuned into, sort of trying to help European organizations and members find best practices both here and on the other side of the Atlantic, and in the US the same, trying to bring a little bit of what's happening in Europe and of the expertise that exists in Europe to the other side. And sort of this cross-pollination, let's say, really benefits, I believe, our members and the public affairs community at large.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also say for the issues that are unique to the United States, whether it's lobbying at the local, state, or federal levels, things like campaign finance mechanisms like political action committees, for those of you who are with organizations that have a presence here in the United States, we have a wealth of expertise in those US specific areas. And then certainly there are issues that are sort of germinating in one part of the world or the other, and then moving around the world. Where, you know, in the past several weeks in particular, spending a lot of time talking with our member organizations about how they're responding in a meaningful and authentic way to the Black Lives Matter movements. You know, what are their companies doing? What are they saying? How is it consistent with who they are? How are they engaging their employee groups? And then also, how is that impacting their public affairs operations? In some cases, they may have been working on legislation or with legislators that have positions that seem to be in opposition in some ways to some of these social justice movements. And so, you know, how are they as an organization going to face those challenges? So it's some of those types of issues where we have unique expertise, and there's practically no limit to the number or type of question you can ask us. I think if you think about our staff, both in Brussels and in the US, as sort of part teachers and consultants, part librarians or researchers who can get access to the information that you need. They're networkers to help connect you with other people who have faced some of the same challenges. They're also, when needed, cheerleaders and therapists, because we know this can certainly be a challenging role to face. But if they can't answer the question themselves, they 99 times out of 100 can get you connected to someone or an organization or a resource that at least is going to set you on the right path. So I would suggest that instead of looking high and low for the answer yourself and then perhaps coming to the council in frustration because you can't find it, start with us first, because between our team of staff experts and our volunteer leaders, we have access to tremendous ideas from around the world.
Yeah, absolutely, Karen. And I would perhaps suggest another profile, yet another profile of council staff, which is practitioners or former practitioners. And so I think many of these questions we have actually faced ourselves. Andras worked for quite a number of years with the European Commission and in other European institutions. I myself also, as a communication professional with the European Union and in other international institutions and with other international projects. So this is oftentimes, these are questions and pains, let's say, that we ourselves have experienced in the past and have struggled with in the past. If we cannot answer your question, we can certainly connect you with others, or at the very least, sympathize with your, empathize with the problem and the challenge that you are facing. So, what are some of the questions that we can answer? And some of these have actually come up very recently. For example, if we are aware of best practices in managing remote teams and coordinating their work, this is something that came up quite a few times now in the context of the lockdown and COVID-19 related constraints. But others, obviously, if we can recommend speakers in Brussels or in other European countries, if we can recommend consultancies, in Europe, and other more strategic, let's say, questions such as how can my team create and implement a European-wide public affairs plan, or how can we measure and effectively report on our public affairs efforts. So, as I mentioned, these are topics and questions about which not only we have in quite a few cases, personal and past professional expertise, but also where the Public Affairs Council has produced a large number of reports, and I think we'll come to that in a minute, but produced a large number of reports and research on that. Andres, I don't know if you want to...
We can get to the next one. Yeah, that's another thing where we come in as a service provider of sort, where if you need a guest speaker or someone to provide a briefing for your team, well, before the lockdown, there were quite a few occasions when regional teams would fly into Brussels and there would be a briefing on European trends or advocacy trends or similar events. And Joao or myself would be guest speakers and provide a briefing. Often we come in as workshop facilitators or trainers. Depending on the topic, we can put together a custom program, perhaps involve others in that. So this is something we provide for members. Yeah. And then the research part and the different surveys and other resources we provide, a small sample of these that we did here in Europe in the past years. There's a report called Opening Doors in Brussels, which is an introduction to the lobby world. In Brussels, it's a freely downloadable report. It's a one-pager that I put together called Working with European Commission Staff, a couple of best practices or ideas to consider when engaging with civil servants. There's another infographic on the EU, and another that we did in the context of our conference, the Digital Advocacy Summit, which we organize each year, this year included. It was a quick survey on digital advocacy trends with a handful of questions to see what the respondents perceive in terms of budgets, what is their understanding of staff and other trends when it comes to engaging online. So there are quite a few resources, and obviously there are many others from the US and those which are not geography specific. So there's one, the State of Corporate Public Affairs, and it's a survey that we run. Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, every 2 years, and
it's actually it's every 3 years. So we're scheduled to complete that survey this year, and so it's a pan-organization look at how the public affairs function is run in corporations. So it includes everything from how it's staffed at the professional and administrative level, how it's budgeted, reporting relationships to the CEO, tools that are used for measurement and evaluation, trends. And so it's a really fascinating look at how this this type of function within an organization is structured. And what's great is that the information is available in aggregate. And I have to apologize. They're mowing my lawn, and so this is one of the joys of working remotely is the lawn service seems to have a knack for knowing exactly when you need to be speaking on a webinar. So apologies for that.
We can't hear it, Karen. So
wonderful, wonderful. And, well, I'll have my children come in and scream just to have a little levity. In any case, so the composite report is available. And in addition, because we have that data set, we can also do customized reports based, for example, on a specific industry sector, based on a certain revenue size. And so if you're really interested in cutting out specific pieces of information of that report, that's another service that's available. And the same is available with some of our other reports, some US specific about things like lobbying or political action committees. But we have other white papers like the ones that you see here about measuring and communicating the value of public affairs or global stakeholder engagement. And we also are doing sort of quicker pulse type of polls to get a sense of what's happening with other pressing issues. So we've done some really interesting research work in the past few months about COVID, how organizations are responding now, how they anticipate things may look for the public affairs field moving forward. Those are all available on our website, pac.org/COVID. And those are, we have made those available to the entire public affairs community, even beyond the membership, because we feel that it's part of the core mission of who the council is, to make sure that all of the issues and trends, especially dealing with challenging times, are available to everyone. And some of the information you see on the slide here are the number of ways that we try to get useful information out to you. And if you're like me, your inbox is already overflowing, and so it's hard to really drill down to find the most useful and actionable information. And so we're very thoughtful at the council about what we do put in your inbox. And so you'll see a couple of examples here. In the middle, there's a screenshot of Impact, which is our award-winning monthly newsletter. You're not going to find in there things hyping about how great the council is or upcoming events. Rather, you're going to see things that you haven't found other places. You're going to find interesting case studies about leading public affairs organizations and how they face challenges head on. You're going to find book reviews about pieces that you may have not necessarily read yourself. You're going to learn about award-winning PAC programs or grassroots involvement programs. But we try to make it really thoughtful and actionable information. And so while that's in a longer form monthly newsletter, we are on all the social media platforms really sending out interesting articles that we think are going to be useful as a public affairs practitioner. So I'd encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, because we do try to share interesting information that we invite you, frankly, to take and to repackage and to share within your organization to help position you as a source of great ideas internally.
And I think just to add to that, even in our personal/professional capacity, I think connect with us on LinkedIn, especially on LinkedIn, because both Joao and myself, we tend to post there related articles and other news.
Yeah, and perhaps one thing that I remembered of mentioning, Karen, as you were speaking about that great resource working together, working through COVID-19 together, we also did set up a similar complementary resource focused on Europe. So about information hubs or analysis or other useful resources that many organizations are compiling about COVID-19 and useful information for public affairs professionals, really, which we have compiled together in a page that is also available through our European Council webpage. So accessing staff expertise, how does that happen? Well, get in touch with us. Basically, we have the europe@pac.org email address, which comes directly to our inboxes. And as Andros mentioned, stay in touch with us through LinkedIn and whichever other platform that you may prefer. Contact us with your questions. And really don't feel free to ask us questions in terms of how technically you can access the information on the website. There is a lot of stuff there that can be really useful for you, and that as a member you can either access for free or at very advantageous conditions.
Maybe a few words about membership benefits and the executive education part. So I did mention that we offer many different forms or many different ways of sharing these good ideas. So certainly there's the peer-to-peer learning, mostly in the form of roundtables. And I think that's something we can restart from September, hopefully, here in our Brussels office, which is at the Square Ambiorix. For those of you based in Brussels are familiar with the local lay of the land, which is basically we're overlooking the Berlaymont building, the Commission headquarters. But this is where we usually have our roundtables and other in-person events. We are also available to go to your premises or travel around. So I often went to different companies, organizations to deliver those speeches or workshops. And then certainly there's a lot of materials that Joao mentioned available in different forms. Just send us an email and we'll find the best format to share that with you. And we're happy to recommend speakers as well, whether it's a speaker or someone who's maybe a consultant or other who's an expert on a certain topic. We try to gather information about everyone's knowledge area. And whenever we get a question to that effect, we will recommend the right person. And then a lot of webinars, and especially since the COVID-19 hit, so we're doing everything online, but we do even interactive workshops online. So not just discussions, but full-blown trainings and virtual events, which are going much more in-depth than a panel discussion would. Yeah, the signature events, maybe Joao, you would like to say a few words on those.
Sure. So these are, let's say, the two signature events here in Europe for the time being, and we do hope to expand that offer even further. But these are the two large conferences that we usually organize here. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 constraints, we could not organize the Brussels Public Affairs Forum this year. It had to be postponed, canceled really, and it will be organized again in May 2021. But what is going ahead this year, as planned, is going to be the European Digital Advocacy Summit. And that's really an event that we are proud to say, I think that it has been evolving over the years. It has become a more and more established event where people really come together to discuss digital advocacy trends. It has been typically a full day event where where speakers, where we have roundtables and panel discussions, but also workshops and skill building sessions. So it's really a mix of hearing the best ideas, sharing ideas and best practices with your peers, but also learning really and learning from others, from experts in certain areas of digital advocacy, learning things that you can really put in practice the next day, or share with your team and have your team think about that and put that in practice in a way that suits you best. So it's really meant to be hands-on and very good value for money for those who participate. Obviously, as with everything that all the events and roundtables that the council does, its members have a privileged access to it. So it's one of the areas where it's an advantage to be a member. So in terms of the activities, and maybe I can start here and then pass the floor on to Andras as well. So when we talk about recent activities or Public Affairs Council activities, we really talk about, as Andras was mentioning a while ago, about a wide spectrum of things that we can organize, be it roundtables here in our office or workshops. It can also be trainings, and we'll speak about the trainings in a bit, whether it's panel discussions, whether it's networking events, whether it's webinars. But all of these have now gone virtual because of the present circumstances. And being virtual, they're free for members. And so that's also an active effort from our part to provide members as much value for their investment in the Public Affairs Council membership. So some of the events that we have organized recently are, for example, around the broad theme of European public affairs. So most recently, very much focused on the constraints of COVID-19 and the subsequent lockdown, preparing your strategy and communication for a new normal. How do different organizations and different organization profiles, whether you're a corporate or a consultancy or a trade association, how do you prepare or how do you advise your clients to prepare for public affairs in these turbulent times? We have also hosted recently an event called Building a Successful EU Lobbying Campaign. So we looked at a step-by-step approach on how organizations can build a lobbying campaign, ranging from gathering intelligence to engaging to then evaluating the result of your efforts and adapting your strategy accordingly. We also organize events around the broad theme of communication and reputation. Most recently, we did an event about digital communication and in action, tips for the bad and the good times. The bad times being the ones we are currently facing, and the good times being hopefully the times that will come relatively soon and still this year. But digital communication, either way, has become increasingly important, and digital tools are increasingly omnipresent. So it's definitely they definitely must be part of the public affairs toolkit for any organization that wants to be effective in doing in lobbying. Measuring and improving corporate reputation in an age of mistrust and trends in digital advocacy in Europe are other events. One was a roundtable here in our office, the other one a webinar that we conducted last February. Andres, if you want to say
yeah, just a few words on the other areas. It's policy and regulatory issues, the Brexit one that I mentioned, and I ran a two-part workshop on EU influence in the context of decision making and looking at the various procedures and timelines and what's the best way to engage with EU civil servants, mostly from a private sector or association perspective. And then development and skill building, there was another webinar or web training that I conducted actually last week, which is on mastering virtual presentations. So it was very interactive and all participants could present in a webinar setting, and there was a lot of peer-to-peer learning element. And another is on career development that João organized with headhunters, looking at the skills and the kind of profile that is going to be or is in demand in the post-COVID job market. And then the custom training, a couple of ideas you see on the screen. It's topics that I myself or João, we conducted in Europe and beyond. I think we even went to somewhere in Central Asia to run a training, and sometimes even in the US. So on both sides, sometimes our American colleagues fly in and they participate or help us out as speakers and facilitators, and sometimes the other way around. But obviously our key focus is the European context. But these are topics that we're happy to conduct trainings or on or provide or be guest speakers if there's a request. And then back to you, Karin, maybe a few words on the signature events you are running.
Thank you. So we run, as we mentioned, between our two offices, about 150 events a year. But the 6 events that you see listed on the slide are what we call our signature events. These are the largest, I think, and most popular events that we do. I would say of these, the ones that tend to have the greatest interest and participation from folks from Europe are first our Digital Media and Advocacy Summit. That has been moved to August 18th. It's going to be done exclusively virtually, which is, I think, to the advantage of our members in Europe. It's a really in-depth look at the various social media and digital tools that are available to you as public affairs practitioners. And you'll be hearing case studies about how folks have implemented them effectively, creatively, in a cost-effective manner. And in that event in particular, we hear not only from the corporations or large associations that make up the vast majority of the council, but frankly, we end up often hearing from advocacy groups who often have a smaller budget, yet have tremendous needs. And so they're often the ones to employ these digital tools early and most creatively, and provide terrific models for thinking about how large or more traditional organizations can implement some of those. The marketing for that event has just gone live, so you can check out our website on that. The other one where we tend to have a large international presence is our Public Affairs Institute. And unlike the other 149 programs where we promise you that when you leave the event, you're going to have practical and actionable information that you can implement once you get back to your office, the Public Affairs Institute is designed to be more of a graduate study type course, looking at issues and trends, some which may be germane to your job today, some which may be germane in the futures, and others which are just going to make you a more interesting and well-rounded practitioner. So instead of being a focused 1 hour webinar or a 1-day conference, it's a week-long event where you must actually apply to be part of the program. And as part of the program, you're in a cohort of 35 other mid to senior level public affairs practitioners who are in deep conversation with leading academics, thought leaders, former elected officials, and it's a really fascinating program that I will have to give short shrift here to because of the amount of time that we have. But if you are looking at your own professional development and how you can broaden your portfolio, I would encourage you to take a look at the Public Affairs Institute. Joel?
Yeah, let's now jump over to the third pillar of what we do and benefits for members, which is community and networking. Before I go there, I would just encourage everyone to submit your questions if you have any, as we are slowly reaching the final stages of our presentation. So here in Europe, we organize more than 50 events per year and trainings per year attended by more than 1,500 of your peers. Obviously, with the limitations that have been imposed by COVID-19, all these events have now been transformed to virtual events. But hopefully this is something that is going to change. We hope still this year. But the point remains the same. There is a lot of opportunities for you to engage, for you and your team to engage with ourselves, to engage with others. And that's not only a networking opportunity, but also a learning opportunity. As we mentioned before, also more than 200 member organizations based or with offices here in Europe with whom you can connect, and we're happy to put you in touch. As we mentioned before, if you need a consultancy in Europe or if you need speakers in Europe, we are very happy to put you in touch with fellow members or non-members that may address the needs and the challenges that you are facing. We also have a European advisory group, which is a group of 14 senior executives working in public affairs in Europe, both from corporations, trade associations, and consultancies. And that advisory group, whom we will meet very soon, provides strategic advice to the European team on the programs that we have been conducting so far, on the programs that we will be continuing in the future, and at the strategic level, they're an extremely helpful sounding board for new ideas and for the challenges that are being faced by the public affairs community. And more to come. And that's something that I wanted to mention before. We will soon be releasing our calendar of events for the second half of 2020. It's going to be ambitious as usual, and we hope that it's a program that is going to address many of the topics and many of the themes that have been represent challenges for public affairs professionals. And so more to come, and we encourage you to stay tuned and stay in contact, because we will release that relatively soon. And then there's also the opportunity to engage in one of our professional networks. And Karen, perhaps I pass the floor over to you again for a bit more information about this.
Sure, thanks. So while we think that there's tremendous value in the size and diversity of the Public Affairs Council, we recognize that sometimes you just want to be with some people who share some of your very specific challenges. So we've developed 5 different networking groups that focus on specific segments of the Public Affairs Council member community. So with each of these areas that you see listed on the slide, we have a networking group. It's free, it's for members only. And within those groups, you're going to find more focused conversations on topics of interest. So for example, in the Social Responsibility Network, we're having conversations about, for example, how are you linking your organization's charitable contributions or your volunteer activities or your environmental practices with the way that you're talking about your organizational reputation within other sectors. So for example, how are your communications teams or folks on your public affairs staff really leveraging some of the good work that you're doing in the community when you're trying to better explain who your organization is. Our international network focuses not only on public affairs activities going on in the EU, but around the world. So it's not unusual for someone to say, my company just acquired a new company that's based in Brazil, for example, and we're trying to figure out what we need in terms of staffing or consultants or who are the key organizations to be involved with. Can you connect me with someone? And so often within the Public Affairs Council International Network, there's a way for you to ask some of those questions and connect with other practitioners. So some of them are divided by public affairs area of expertise. Our association network, as the name would indicate, is designed for people who are working within trade or professional associations and are leading public affairs for those groups. And so would invite you to be part of that. And then finally, our Emerging Leaders Network is a group for our next generation of public affairs professionals. And so within that group, we often talk about career development. We talk about looking for opportunities to try to raise your profile and to envision the type of leading public affairs role you would like to have in the future, and talk with more experienced folks about how to get there. So for those members only networks, you can either go on our website and sign up, or you can always feel free to just send an email either to our European office, that's europe@pac.org, or to me and our membership team, membership@pac.org, and we'll get you signed up, and then you'll start getting the regular newsletters and other communications from the networks. And then this is our board of directors. We're very unusual. As I mentioned, we are a nonprofit organization. And so our volunteer governance structure is where we have a board of directors that helps to guide not only the Public Affairs Council as an organization, but also helps us to be forward-looking in the field of public affairs to make sure that the resources and services that we're offering to the member community are ones that are meaningful and are going to help you to advance your organization's public affairs objective. What's unusual is the size of our board. We have 160 people on our board of directors, which for those of you who have been involved with other boards will know, typically you'll have maybe a dozen people, but essentially the board of directors it's a fiduciary board, but it's also a group where senior level public affairs practitioners come together to learn and network while also supporting the Public Affairs Council. And so there's an annual nominations process that we're actually in the midst of right now. So if you or one of your colleagues is interested in the board, I'd be more than happy to talk with you about that. But there is a subset of the board called the Executive Committee that really does more sort of the nitty gritty governance issues, like looking at our budget and our strategic plan. That small group is one that tends to focus more on the traditional sort of nonprofit governance and oversight issues. And our board is very reflective of the membership at large. So the folks you see in the picture here are representing Pfizer and AT&T, but also Stanford University. And so we try to make sure that the leadership structure of the council has representation from all of our Public Affairs Council member sectors. Joao?
That's pretty much it, I think. So follow us on different channels. And if you have questions now, then do type it into the chat box. But if anything comes to mind at any point, just send us an email. We'll be always happy to follow up with you. And we love getting questions because that helps us understand what needs are out there, what sort of programs we might want to do. So do not shy away from emailing us because our answer will be hopefully helpful to you, but your very question represents a great value to us. So rather use the services more than less, and share it with your colleagues as well. So as Karen said earlier, there's no limitation as to how many staff from your organization can use the benefits of Public Affairs Council membership. So send us perhaps their emails or their contact details. We can put them on their mailing list, and they can also benefit from all the webinars and other events that we run. I think with that, Karen, Joao, anything else to add?
I don't think we have any questions from the audience, I think, but I would just reiterate your point, Andres. It's we are actively listening, and we like to be actively listening to the public affairs community. So if you do have questions, comments, suggestions, do get in touch. We're happy to. These days it has to be virtual, but hopefully soon also physically be able to meet you face to face and just hear your thoughts, hear your suggestions, because these do inform the services and especially the webinars and the roundtables and the topics that we will be discussing. And so that's really useful both for us and for you. So just to reiterate that point. And Karen, any parting thoughts from your end?
No, it's been a pleasure to be with you today. Again, to reiterate, we are here for you both in the European office, in the US office, and virtually. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We are a very high touch, customer service friendly organization, and truly our staff and our organization get a charge and get real fulfillment out of being able to help you to succeed. So please don't hesitate to reach out, even if you're not sure what the question is. If just set up a virtual coffee or chance to get to know each other, but we look forward to working with you.